Okay, welcome to A Better Lifestyle, everybody. My name is Richard L'Esperance. I go by the name of my man Richard. Today, I have the pleasure to have Sarah Larbi. Sarah is doing some great works in the real estate industry. She's a real estate investor, developer. She's a coach. She's a mentor. I think she was able to retire a few years ago in her 30s. We'll be talking about that a little bit. She does midterm and short-term rentals. She has her hands on a lot of stuff, so we'll be diving into that. So, welcome, Sarah, to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Great. So, what draw you to the real estate industry?
You know what? Originally, it was how to create freedom and other sources of income. Not necessarily real estate per se, but I really started doing a lot of research. I think it was probably in 2010, 2011, 2012, researching how people, create other sources of income. And real estate kept coming back as one of those ways that a lot of millionaires have become millionaires and how people have created that freedom. Real estate kept coming back as a common theme and a topic. And so I figured, why not just, go for it? I'm, fairly action oriented and took a bit of time and years to learn. But 2013, decided to take some action and bought my first rental property at that point and then kind of just move forward from there.
So, how was the process from? I think you were able to escape your corporate job in about 7 years, I believe. So, how was that process?
Yeah, so I started investing in 2013. My last corporate work day was October 1st of 2020. I actually had a great boss and I ended up finding a great company for the last 5 years of my corporate career. So I did give them a 6 months notice, because they deserve that. And then I think just the opportunities open up when you leave. But yeah, it took 7 years. It wasn't quick. A lot of it was using the BRRRR strategy: buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat, and holding on to the properties, buying in the bottom tier of the markets, and then over time getting into some short-term rentals, cottages, small multifamily, with more than just one unit. And then in 2020 decided to do the leap to keep doing real estate essentially full time and leave the corporate world.
I think when you left your corporate, you had 14 doors. Is that correct?
I
Or,
think I had about 10 or 11. Yeah.
okay.
10 or 11 properties, and then a couple of them were triplexes.
Okay. So, it's a mix of single homes and triplexes, or?
A mix of single homes, duplexes, tries, yes.
Okay. So, now how many doors that you have now?
I don't know. You know what? It's a hard question to answer because there are a lot of JVs that I've done over the last, I would say, 3 years, JV partnerships. So, I could tell you I have 100 doors, but I will tell you, it's not as impressive as it sounds because sometimes you're partners on certain projects, right? I have a 22 unit building. There's four partners. I have, probably 10 fourplexes with partners, right? So yeah, it's a portion of stuff. And then there's properties that I own by myself as an example as well. So to add everything up like that is hard to say. So when somebody tells you they have 100 doors, it's usually not fully solely owned for the majority of the time. So I would say I have a handful of properties that I own by myself, and then I have multiple properties that I have in, JV partnerships of different sorts.
What's the end goal?
I mean, to be honest, the end goal right now for me and where this is, country is going and the liberal government, and not to get too political, is probably to have a 5 year exit out of this country and, live somewhere warm. I don't know exactly where it's going to be yet, but I unfortunately think that a lot of the Canadian policies and the country itself isn't as geared to business and entrepreneurship as it once was. Um, Not to say that there's no more opportunities. I mean, I just found a cute little cottage for $215,000, a few months ago that is almost ready to put on the Airbnb market. But I think, I think for me personally, I probably have a 5 year exit. I'm going to continue finishing the resort, which is the big project I'm working on right now. Developing a main lodge, creating a hospitality business out of it, and then look at another country altogether, probably to move to. I don't have kids, not married, so part of that comes with the freedom of choosing where to live and not necessarily being tied down to anything other than the resort for me for now.
So that's the only development project that you have or you've done before?
Well, that's the first from a raw land, completely, it was just grass when that piece of land was purchased. I bought a couple other pieces of land in the past, sold those off as well. Didn't necessarily build on them, but this is the one that is development to build. And then there's another, 15,000 square feet of commercial space that was converted into 22 residential units. So the four walls were there, but everything else inside was not.
So you partnered with people for that project and like for your whole entire portfolio. How was the capital process of getting access to capital to fund these projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix of it was a mix of our capital, and then it was a mix of bringing in additional capital partners, strictly for more passive roles. But I would say for like to give you an example, like for the resort itself, and this is separate from my own stuff. Like my own stuff, I put my own capital in. But if I'm partnering with somebody, so like for example, the resort property, when it was purchased, I ended up negotiating a vendor take back, which means that the seller held the mortgage for 2 years, just because bank financing is very, very hard to get with raw land, and then closed on it with our own cash. So there's three of us in this resort as an example, and then use private money with a percentage to do the build out, refinance that with a credit union, and paid back the private money essentially. So, and then in terms of additional cash, it's been a lot of our cash as well. And then just recently we're building a main lodge. So we're actually bringing in one cash partner, to fund the building.
In regards to the development, how do you manage risk? Because the cost of building is very expensive, and
Mhm.
sometimes you don't know at the end. I don't know when you expect the project to be completed, but when sometimes these projects and you don't know where the economy is going to be, interest rates and all that. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, there's always risk in things like that, especially in these longer term projects. I think so. Strategically, I invited two partners, one being a builder slash contractor that has been doing this for 40 plus years. So he's got his own team. So I think part of that is having it in house. Definitely helps with the costs, with the labor and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, look, when I bought this land, it was 2021. The market was great. Airbnb was booming. You put anything on the market for one night, everybody wanted to get out because they were trapped at home. So it was a very different market and people had a lot more disposable income. Today, people don't have that same amount of disposable income. So your price per night, where it would have been $700, is maybe $200 a night to rent. So there's definitely a lot of changes. You have to be able to absorb some of the risk. Of course, it's never going to be 100%. And I'll tell you in this market specifically, it's been tough. It's been tough for the last, 3 to 4 years for anybody that's been active. There are some really good deals to be found today, but yeah, anything that, we would have purchased, you have to have, luckily I started in 2013 and didn't just start 2 years ago or at the height of the market, but, I'm sure we've all felt it along the way. It's been you know, a tough go, I think, for a lot of investors. The rates went up very, very quickly. The lending, appetite for a lot of the big lenders, shrunk quite dramatically. The loan to values, decreased. So, yeah, there's definitely some risk in that kind of stuff. I wouldn't say start with that project as your first one. Start with something small for sure. But yeah, it's been a tough go. But I think these are more of a hospitality type of play, and you want to have different things in your portfolio to kind of balance it out, right? The boring long-term rentals balance out a lot of the, fun projects that you might want to do. And I think ultimately this resort will do really well. But we're still about a 5 year 5-year turnaround plan. These are long projects. So I would say don't necessarily start there. But ultimately buy something that you can afford, should you have to carry it. you know?
So it brings me to my next question. Why diversify? You kind of mentioned maybe a little bit, but some people sometimes they say like go on one type of asset, go all in and all that. So why did you diversify?
I mean, I think just because I was in the market for so long, and when I first started, the buy and hold made sense from a cash flow perspective. And then as I continued, the markets increased in price, and it was harder. So then I had to buy things that needed more work, to make it, to buy a lower, and then to do the renovations to be able to recycle my cash, and go into the next one. And then as prices continued to go up, because keep in mind I started in 2013, multifamily became more important because I wanted to make sure that my properties each covered themselves and gave me something at the end of each month, right? And so that's kind of how I looked at things. And then it became, okay, I have to take a house and I have to create multiple units, so I have multiple different rents coming in, sources of income. And then I got into the short-term market, and I'll tell you the cash flow was definitely a lot better, more lucrative. It's definitely more hands-on, more work. But it was a help to boost the cash flow, and it really was essentially a cash flow play from day one for me. So what made sense in terms of, what can I buy that's undervalue? What can I buy that I can increase the value, and eventually refinance and pull out cash into, scale into the next one? And what can I buy that I can, make some sort of cash flow every month on? And a lot of the properties that I bought, that's what I was essentially, and what I still go after is making sure that, I'm not buying an $800,000 condo that is going to cost me $1,000 a month, because that makes no sense. You can't go very far with that. So they're all cash flow plays. And ultimately, they were rental. You can rent short term, you can rent long term, you can rent midterm, which is 30 plus days, very similar to short term, but you're avoiding a lot of the tax and bylaw stuff. There's student rentals, which I didn't get into, but you can do different types of rental strategies to increase what you're getting per month on the properties.
What are some obstacles that you had to overcome?
There's a lot. I think, in the beginning, it's just understanding how to scale, how to acquire more, how to approach the lenders, how to position yourself so that, you can get financing. So I think in the beginning was definitely a big learning curve, creating your processes, your systems, even from like screening tenants and understanding how to not put the bad ones. And I've had experiences with tenants that I've had to take to the landlord tenant board because they, got onto drugs, and then all of a sudden, and some of them were good for 10 years, and then last year it went all downhill. So, there's so many challenges. I'll tell you, if this was easy, everybody would do it. And it's definitely not easy, but it is rewarding. And it is definitely a long-term play that I think makes sense if you have the stamina, the grit, the mindset to stay in the game. I think one of the big things for me was I was in a 18-year relationship that ended in 2024. And though we did not have all the properties together, we still had about 8 together. And so, those had to be split, of course. And that's a challenge, right? And now you're kind of trying to rebuild a little bit, which, not great, but everything happens for a reason. And then just the market increasing, the rates, the whole pandemic piece was definitely, I would say in the beginning, good for investors that were in the game already. But afterwards, because of all the money printing that they did and the inflation, they increased the rates so much, which killed a lot of people's cash flow. And so there's maneuvering those challenges. So it's like, okay, you look at the properties and you're like, what can you do to increase the revenue on each property? Is it worth holding on to, keeping? I think in today's market too, it's if you're going to sell anything, I mean, there's always, the tax issues and stuff like that, but it's a buyer's market right now. So a lot of people are saying, okay, well, I'm not cash flowing on these properties. Do I sell it? Well, it's not really a great time to sell. So just maneuvering through all the market cycles, I think a lot of people, were doing so well and then got, maybe just I don't know, jaded by all this great stuff coming and then just having to maneuver, even from a mental standpoint, the downside that we've experienced in the last, 3, 4 years. And it's a cycle and it'll come back, I don't know when, and the market will bounce back. But I think it's just a matter of like, these are long plays. The best properties I had, the best properties that fared well were the ones that I've had for the longest amount of time.
Uh, Patience and resilience plays a big part in real estate. What do you think about that? About those two things?
I think most people don't have it. I think I think when things get tough, people panic and they exit. But I think it's so important because these real estate plays, I'm calling them plays, but buying real estate is supposed to not be fun and it's supposed to be boring, and patience is a huge part of it for sure. Um, and keeping and not selling as much as possible, as long as it makes sense. The resilience piece, yeah. I mean, look, there's so many things that are thrown at us all the time. There's fires to fight, whether it's plumbing issues, whether it's tenant issues. There's just so many things. And I think a lot of people just are not passionate enough about their end goal, whether it's the freedom or creating legacy or, helping their family, get to that next step. And they lose track of it. And I think when things go wrong, they give up. And a lot of people, I think, gave up in the last, I would say, 3 years. A lot of people gave up and a lot of people sold. And a lot of people also gave up from a political standpoint and seeing what's happening and moved to the US and moved, real estate investments elsewhere. And, there's definitely a big wave of that. I still think there's an opportunity for Canada. I think for me personally, I could still manage, not necessarily living in Canada full time. But yeah, you have to have both those things. You have to have grit and you have to be mentally strong because every week there will be a different fire. Every week there will be a different issue. And you will have to juggle that with all your other requirements, whether it's family, jobs, work, that kind of stuff. And there's sacrifices to be made. I think, when I first started investing in real estate and I was still working corporate, I used to wake up at 4 a.m. to get to the gym for 5:15. Then I'd be at the office for 8, probably till 5. Then I'd go home, have a quick dinner, and then I'd probably be doing some real estate related thing for another 4 hours. So I probably would say I had no life for, a good 4 years of those 7 years where I was doing both. And it's not because I was buying the real estate, but it's because in my brain, I'm like, you know what? Let's do these events. Let's do this podcast. And I was creating a lot of other things alongside that just because I was so passionate about it. And that took a lot of time. And I think, but I think that whether it's that or something else, I think there's sacrifices that you have to make and it's not going to be a week and you're going to be done. Like these are long-term sacrifices, but ultimately there will be light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, I think that's a good summary there.
Looking back, would you have done things, are there things that you would have done differently?
Oh, I don't know about differently. I think ultimately, could I have bought more early on? Sure. Um, I think if I had maybe spread out my time a little better, because there were days that I was definitely fairly burnt out. I was going through it. When the pandemic happened and COVID happened and everybody had to stop, I actually stopped. And that was the first time I think in a long time where I wasn't always go, 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 go. Because sometimes when you just go too much, you don't even have time to pause and breathe and think. And, I was literally sitting on my dock having a glass of wine at the cottage. And I'm like, why am I killing myself doing this? Had a conversation with my mortgage broker. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking of leaving. What do you think? She's like, it's a good idea. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to refinance your properties. Literally had a conversation with my accountant. I'm like, what do you think, if I left? She's like, yeah, you're paying way too many taxes because I was in a crazy tax bracket with having, some properties in my name, but most importantly, my job. And I was, doing six figures, like low six figures with my job. It was a great job, but ultimately you're paying a ton of taxes along the way. Um, and I don't know if I would have left and made that decision if I wasn't forced to stop. If like the world didn't shut down. And it's, and I would say it's the other way around. It was the other way around for me is I just I don't know if I had the best balance. Like I had a chef, I delegated a lot, but could I have enjoyed life a little bit more, traveled a little bit more while I was going through the process? Potentially. I think so. Like, I remember back in was it 2013, 2014? I used to cash out my vacation money because you could do that at the job that I was at that point, to use towards the down payments rather than a vacation. So it gives you an idea of where my head was at. And I think there's probably some common ground and some balance in between, what I did and, the other opposite and finding what works for that person.
Well, you paid the price, so it's either one thing or the other. So I think,
Yeah,
so there's always like for success, there's always a price to pay. So you
there's
can't,
always, yeah.
yeah. Biggest lesson in that journey.
I just won, eh? There's so many things along the way, but I would just say, enjoy the process. But also like work on your mental strength. Read books, have mentors that inspire you, have friends that push you, help you grow. And I think sometimes, we don't have those circles. And so I think the biggest lesson is just put yourself out there, find the people like you. There's a lot of people out there, even me when I started, I didn't know anybody in real estate. I didn't even know that you could buy 10 houses as an example. I think I watched one person once on a seminar say that. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Why don't I just, really think about that? And originally, for a long time, it was like, I need to get to 10 properties. But I think you have to be surrounded by other people that are going to influence you, that are going to push you. And usually it's, if you're not an entrepreneur, you're not in this game, you're probably the only one thinking like this. You're probably the only one that's thinking beyond just collecting a paycheck at work. And so trying to find other people that think, that grow, that push you to be better. That was a big thing for me as I was doing this journey. And a lot of, the people that I knew back then are not the people that I hang out with now. I think that's a huge thing. So, and I think a lot of it too is finding the right people that are also ahead of you, that can, you know, show you that there's more to it than what you're thinking, right? You can think bigger. So I think that's just like that's a big thing. I think, who you surround yourself with and, and their mindset is going to reflect on you.
You said at the beginning you plan to leave in the next 5 years. Are you still gonna do real estate if you leave?
Yeah, like I'm gonna keep my properties. Like for me personally, here's the thing: is I really crave the freedom, and I love heat, and I don't love snow. So I think I'll probably do something, even if it's I've committed to the resort for 5 years. Regardless, I'm committed to it. But I think after that, whether I put somebody to manage it or it gets sold off, to another company, my ideal life would be even if it's 6 months, right? 6 months in Panama or Mexico, 6 months back here you know, and yeah, start buying real estate somewhere else. I don't know exactly where it's going to be yet. There's pros and cons to the US markets. There's pros and cons to, international markets as well. I think some of them can, like Mexico, for example, is very saturated in my opinion. I probably wouldn't buy there myself. That's just my opinion. But I think that there is some benefit in having real estate in other types of currencies in other countries, um, and then just enjoying life. But I don't know what it is. I just always felt like I was nomadic, and traveling is maybe because I missed a lot of it while I was younger. That these days in the last few years, most of the winter now gone somewhere. I was actually just in Nashville last month. Before that, I was in Mexico for 2 weeks. Before that, I was, in Dominican, and they're fun. They're fun. I mean, it's not super far, and it's still, this time zone, but ultimately, I'd like to be gone for longer, and why not? You got one short life. It's very short.
Uh, what advice would you have for people who want to get into real estate? Because sometimes people want to get into real estate, but there's a lot of obstacles like capital and all that. So, what
Mhm.
would you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, look, your team is going to be the most important, I think. Whether it's a mortgage broker that has worked and scaled investors, a realtor that's also a real estate investor that understands the market really well. Capital. I mean, a lot of people might have capital in their primary home that they can unlock and use part of it to do the next one. They can partner with another person if they don't have the capital. Maybe they have a good job with financing. They can partner with somebody that has the capital. Um, they could slash quote unquote move into a property with for 5% down, house hack, as the first one, rent out the rooms in their house as an example. So there's different ways that you can do it. You don't need a ton of capital. I don't think it's fair to say you need zero of your own money down. I think, there's always going to be some money required, or you're going to have to bring in a partner. But I think ultimately the team is important, right? Find your I would just say a good real estate specific for investing mortgage broker, and a good realtor that's done this multiple times. A coach, if they want a coach that's done it before in the past. But yeah, you do need some money. It doesn't have to be thousands and thousands, but you need some money to get started.
Where can people learn more about you and follow you?
They can email me, Sarah@sarahlarbi.com. They can go to my website, sarahlarbi.com. Instagram is probably where I'm the most active, which is at investor Sarah Larbi. And they can listen to my podcast as well. It's called Where Should I Invest? So if they type that, or they type in my name, Sarah Larbi, in iTunes or Apple Podcasts, I should say, or wherever else, they should be able to find the show. I've been doing it since 2017. I'm probably close to 400 episodes now, and it's a lot of just sharing stories, interviewing others that are doing it, and I learned a lot from listening to American podcasts back then. When I first started, there was not so much Canadian content. And a lot of what I learned was from that. So if you are not in a circle right now where people inspire you and push you to do more, podcasts are a great way to learn from others, connect with others that way. That's huge. And so I would say, those are probably the best connections and the best places anyways to reach out to me for.
I believe you have another podcast, no? Or
Sorry?
I believe you have another podcast, no? Don't you have two?
I did have two. I only have one now. One podcast is good for now. The
Okay.
other one was with a club I was running, but I'm not doing that anymore.
Okay, no problem. All right. Thanks, Sarah, for being here. It was nice meeting you and talking to you. I
Thank
hope
you.
you're welcome. I hope everybody found some value in that episode. On that note, thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode, everybody. Bye.
Bye.